She stared at the 3 pregnancy tests lined up on the back of the toilet tank like gravestones, watching the pink lines materialize like accusations written in her own biology. Her hands trembled against the cracked tile floor. The cheap fluorescent bulb hummed overhead. How? The word came out strangled, barely a whisper. How can a virgin be pregnant? But the lines didn't fade. They stared back at her, undeniable, impossible, absolute, scientific, true. Outside her mother's cramped Newark apartment, freezing rain pelted the window. Sirens wailed in the distance. Inside, Amara's entire world tilted on its axis. Everything she knew about her body, her choices, her carefully constructed faith, it all became noise. The smell of bleach from last night's cleaning job still clung to her hands like evidence of a life that suddenly felt very far away. Because somewhere in Manhattan, 15 miles in a universe away, a man she'd never met was about to learn that his last chance at an heir had been planted in the wrong woman. And when Luca Moretti discovered mistakes, people didn't just lose their jobs, they disappeared. 3 weeks earlier, Amara's life had been beautifully ordinary. She worked the day shift for Sparklelux Cleaning, scrubbing marble bathrooms in Manhattan penthouses that cost more than her entire neighborhood. The pay was hourly. The work was brutal. But it was hers, every dollar earned, every choice made, every dream still within reach. At 23, Amara was in that strange purgatory between youth and the rest of her life. She had an associate degree from community college she'd paid for herself, working doubles through every semester. She had her mother's medical bills and her siblings' school expenses weighing on her like chains. And she had a plan. Always a plan. By 25, she'd have her bachelor's in accounting. By 26, a stable CPA position. By 30, she'd buy her family a small house with a real yard. Somewhere safe, somewhere hers. The plan didn't include miracles. It didn't include fairy tales. And it definitely didn't include Manhattan fertility clinics. But her best friend since high school, Tasha, had insisted. Just one day, Tasha had begged over lunch at the food court, her bright acrylic nails tapping the plastic table. It's a women's wellness fair in Manhattan. Free health screenings, spa samples, networking. When do you ever do anything for yourself, Mara? Tasha was everything. Amara wasn't loud, spontaneous, fearless. They'd bonded in 10th grade over shared church youth group meetings and a mutual dream of getting out of Newark. Tasha had done it by becoming a social media beauty influencer. Amara was still grinding. I can't afford to miss a work day, Amara had said, which was true. It's on a Saturday, and it's free. Free facials, free vitamin samples, free checkups. You haven't been to a real doctor in how long? Amara had gone quiet. Healthcare was expensive. She'd been putting it off. Exactly, Tasha had said, smug. It's free. It's in a nice part of the city. You'd be stupid not to. So Amara had done something wildly out of character. She'd taken a Saturday off, put on her one good dress, and followed Tasha to Manhattan. The wellness fair had been overwhelming in the best way. White booths with soft lighting, smiling women in designer athleisure, goodie bags with skincare products Amara had only seen in Instagram ads, stations offering blood pressure checks, bone density scans, nutritional consultations. Look at this, Tasha had said on hour 2, waving a glossy brochure. New Horizons Fertility. They're doing free hormone panels and reproductive health screenings, building their community outreach profile or whatever. Amara had raised an eyebrow. A free pelvic exam? That's your idea of a fun Saturday? When was the last time you went to a gynecologist? Amara had looked away. Exactly, Tasha had said. It's free. It's right here. Don't be stupid. So Amara had gone. The New Horizons booth had been sleek, all frosted glass and soft music. The staff wore crisp white coats. They spoke gently. A nurse handed her a tablet, and Amara filled out her information, checking boxes about her cycle, her health history, her sexual activity. Virgin. She tapped that box and flushed with embarrassment. We're running a bit behind, a young technician had said apologetically, guiding her to a private room. We'll just do a quick internal exam to check for fibroids and cysts. Standard stuff. Can you sign here? Amara, overwhelmed by the clinical white walls and Tasha's voice in her head calling her stupid if she didn't, had signed the digital consent form. The procedure had been uncomfortable, cold, forgettable. She'd thanked the kind-eyed doctor, accepted an aftercare pamphlet she didn't read, and left with a faint cramp she blamed on the uncomfortable examination chair. She'd thought nothing of it. 2 days later, she was back at work. Back to scrubbing toilets in apartments she'd never afford. Back to night classes and budgeting apps and the comfortable weight of her spreadsheets. Back to reality. And then her period didn't come. At first she'd brushed it off. Stress, long hours. Her cycle had been weird before. But when the second week passed and nausea hit her every morning, when she couldn't stand the smell of bleach anymore, when exhaustion knocked her flat by 6 p.m., a cold dread settled into her bones. So she'd bought 3 tests at the corner bodega, hands shaking as she paid cash, avoiding Mr. Patel's eyes like she was buying something sinful. And now here she was, pregnant. Impossible. She picked up the first test again, held it under the fluorescent light as if a different angle might change the result. 2 lines. She tried the second. 2 lines. The third. This isn't real, she whispered to her reflection in the cracked mirror. This isn't happening. But her reflection, dark circles under her eyes, edges of panic in her expression didn't answer, and the lines didn't fade, and somewhere deep in her accountant's brain that lived and died by numbers, Amara knew. Numbers don't lie. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands and opened her email. 1 new message. Subject line, urgent follow-up required. New Horizons fertility. Her stomach dropped. Something had gone terribly, impossibly wrong. Amara called the number in the email with shaking hands, her mother's voice carrying from the kitchen something about dinner. Something normal that felt like it belonged to a different universe. The receptionist transferred her immediately. No hold music. No wait. Miss James. The voice was female, careful, terrified. This is Dr. Helena Price. Thank you for calling back so quickly. What? Administrative concern. Amara's voice was steadier than she felt. What happened at that fair? A long pause. Then, is there somewhere private you can talk? Amara locked herself in the Dunin bathroom again, sitting on the closed toilet lid, staring at the 3 tests she hadn't thrown away yet. Tell me. Dr. Price's voice cracked. There was a procedural error during your screening. A chart mix-up. You were... Miss James, you were artificially inseminated with a private client's genetic material. The words didn't make sense at first. They arrived in her ears as sounds, not meaning. You what? It was an accident. A terrible, unforgivable accident. 2 patient files were swapped by a temporary technician. You should never have been who? Amara's hands were fists now, nails cutting into her palms. Whose? I can't disclose. You put someone's sperm inside me without my consent and you can't disclose? Her voice rose, dangerous and raw. I will burn your entire clinic to the ground. I will call every news station in this city. I will... Luca Moretti. Silence. The sperm belongs to Luca Moretti, Dr. Price whispered, like saying his name too loud might summon him. He's a very powerful man. A businessman. He was in a shooting years ago. Complications left him functionally infertile. We've been helping him with surrogacy and IVF for years. That sample was his last viable specimen. His only chance at a biological heir. Amara's mouth went dry. She didn't know the name, but the way Dr. Price said it like a curse, like a prayer, told her everything she needed to know. We need you to come in, doctor. Price continued, speaking faster now, desperate. We can schedule a termination procedure. Discreet. Safe. We'll cover all costs and provide a settlement. Significant compensation. 7 figures. You'd never have to work again. But you'd need to sign a non-disclosure agreement, and you absolutely cannot, under any circumstance, tell Mr. Moretti what happened. You want me to kill it and pretend this never happened. Miss James, if Luca Moretti finds out about this mistake, if he learns that a stranger is carrying his only biological brain, child, I don't know what he'll do. To you? To us? This is for your safety. Amara looked at the pregnancy tests. At the impossible pink lines. No, Miss James, I didn't ask for this. I didn't consent to any of this. But I'm not killing a baby because you people are scared. Her voice shook with fury and something else, something fierce and protective she didn't recognize. You want to fix your mistake? You leave me alone. And if you pressure me again, I'm calling a lawyer and the press. She hung up. For 3 days her phone stayed silent. She went to work. She smiled at customers. She pretended the world wasn't ending. On the 4th night, it rained. Black SUVs appeared on her street just after 9 p.m., blocking both ends like a military operation. Neighbors peeked through curtains. Amara's mother opened the door to 3 men in expensive suits, and a 4th figure behind them, tall, broad-shouldered, with a scar cutting through his left eyebrow and eyes like winter. Amara. James? His voice was quiet, controlled, lethal. She stepped forward before her mother could speak, heart slamming against her ribs. I'm Amara. He studied her, this small black girl in oversized sweatpants and a faded church camp t-shirt, bare feet on worn carpet, chin lifted in defiance despite the terror in her eyes. We need to talk, Luca Moretti said. About my child. They sat in her tiny living room, Luca, on the sagging couch, his lawyer beside him with a leather briefcase, 2 security men flanking the door. Amara's mother hovered in the kitchen doorway, rosary beads wrapped around her knuckles. Her younger siblings peeked from the hallway. Luca looked obscene here. His suit probably cost more than 3 months of their rent. His watch caught the overhead light like a weapon. You're carrying my son, he said. Not a question. I'm pregnant, Amara corrected, voice tight. I don't know what it is yet. The clinic confirmed the implantation. They used my genetic material. That makes it mine. They used it without my permission. That makes it a crime. His jaw tightened. For a moment, she thought he might explode. Instead, he leaned back, fingers steepled like a man negotiating a business deal. Here's what's going to happen. You'll carry the pregnancy to term. I'll pay off your family's debts, all of them. Medical bills, student loans, whatever you need. You'll have the best doctors, private care, security. When the baby is born, we'll determine custody arrangements. No. He blinked. Excuse me? You don't get to walk into my house and tell me what's going to happen. Amara's hands shook, but her voice didn't. I didn't ask for this baby. I didn't ask for you. But now it's here, and I'm not getting rid of it just because your clinic made a mistake. Then what do you want? She hadn't prepared for this, hadn't expected him to ask. But the answer came instinctively, pulled from the same stubborn place that got her through double shifts and night, classes, and every moment her life tried to break her. I want full control over every medical decision. My doctor, my hospital, my choices. I want legal co-guardianship in writing. Whatever happens, I don't disappear from this child's life, and I want a guarantee that nothing happens to my family. No threats, no pressure, no men in suits showing up when I don't do what you want. Luca stared at her like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. You're not afraid of me. I'm terrified of you, Amara said honestly. But I'm more afraid of losing control of my own body again. Something shifted in his expression, brief, almost imperceptible. Respect, maybe. Or curiosity. He turned to his lawyer. Draft it. Everything she said. Legal co-guardianship, medical autonomy, family protection clause. Sir, I'd advise, draft it. The lawyer opened his briefcase. 72 hours later, Amara stood in the marble foyer of an estate 2 hours north of Newark, her single duffel bag at her feet, staring at a chandelier that cost more than her entire life. Your suite is on the 3rd floor, a housekeeper said, her tone polite but cold. East wing. Dinner is at 7. Mr. Moretti expects punctuality. Amara's official title, live-in staff member. Her real role, incubator for the boss's impossible heir. She climbed the sweeping staircase, past oil paintings of stern-faced men, past windows overlooking manicured gardens patrolled by armed guards. This was safety, she told herself. Protection. It felt like a beautiful prison. The first ultrasound was scheduled for week 10. Luca sat beside her in the private clinic, all white walls and expensive equipment, his expression unreadable as the technician squeezed cold gel onto Amara's stomach. The screen flickered. Static. Shadows. Then, a rapid flutter. A tiny, insistent heartbeat. There, the technician said, smiling. Strong and healthy. Amara's breath caught. It was real. Not just lines on a test. A living thing. A person. She glanced at Luca. His face had gone pale, eyes fixed on the screen like he was seeing something holy. I need a minute, he said abruptly, standing. He walked out without another word. When he returned 10 minutes later, his eyes were red. He didn't explain, didn't apologize, just sat back down and watched the rest of the scan in silence, his hand gripping the armrest so hard his knuckles went white. That night, Amara found a note slipped under her door. Thank you for not giving up on him. No signature, but she knew. The note stayed tucked in Amara's journal, unmentioned but not forgotten. Life in the estate found a strange rhythm. She attended her online classes in the library. Luca worked from his office, door always cracked, as if keeping an ear out for her. They rarely spoke beyond logistics, doctor's appointments, meal preferences, whether she needed anything, until his uncle arrived. Salvatore Moretti was older, silver-haired, with the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. He sat across from Luca in the study, while Amara passed by with a glass of water. "You need to marry the girl," Salvatore said, not bothering to lower his voice. "Legitimize the heir. The families are already talking. No. Luca, be reasonable. She's not a bargaining chip." Luca's voice went cold, dangerous. "She's carrying my son. That doesn't make her my property." Amara paused in the hallway, heart pounding. "She's a maid," Salvatore hissed. "From Newark. No family name, no connections. You could have anyone. Get out." "Silence," I said. "Get out." Salvatore left. Luca stayed in his study for hours. The domestic moments crept up on them. Luca asking about her cravings and returning from the city with bags of sour candy and strawberry ice cream. Amara discovering his private library, first editions of Dante, Marcus Aurelius, Machiavelli, and realizing he'd read them all, margins full of annotations. Late nights in the kitchen when she couldn't sleep, finding him there too, drinking whiskey in the dark. "Why do you read philosophy?" she asked once. He'd looked at her, surprised she'd spoken. "Because men like me need reminders that we're still capable of thinking beyond violence." "Are you?" "I don't know yet." She'd poured herself milk, sat across from him. "Tell me about the shooting." So he did. A rival's ambush. 3 bullets, chest, abdomen, groin. Months of surgeries. The moment the doctors told him children were no longer possible. "I thought I'd made peace with it," he admitted. "Then they told me about you. And now? Now I'm afraid," he said quietly, "that I'll lose him the way I've lost everything else that mattered." At 17 weeks, Amara woke to wetness and pain. She turned on the lamp. Blood soaked the sheets. She screamed. The drive to the hospital was a blur, Luca carrying her to the car, his face bone white, security vehicles flanking them like a convoy. The private clinic. The emergency ultrasound. The doctor's calm, clinical, voice explaining placental irritation, threatened miscarriage, strict bed rest. "The baby's heartbeat is still strong," the doctor said. "But the next 48 hours are critical." They admitted her overnight. Monitors beeped. IV fluids dripped. Amara stared at the ceiling, terror clawing at her throat. Luca sat beside her bed, still in his blood-stained shirt, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. "I can't lose him," he whispered. "I've had 3 surrogates, 3 pregnancies. None made it past 20 weeks. They all said it was my genetics, that my sample was too damaged, that I was the problem." Amara turned her head, saw the cracks in his armor. "When they told me about you, about the mistake, I thought maybe God was giving me one last chance. But if I lose him..." His voice broke. "If I lose you..." "I'm not going anywhere," Amara said, reaching for his hand. He gripped it like a lifeline. 48 hours later, the bleeding stopped. The heartbeat remained strong. The doctor cleared her for modified activity. They drove back to the estate in silence. But when Luca helped her out of the car, his hand stayed on her back, protective, gentle, nothing like the cold businessman who'd invaded her living room months ago. That night, she found another note under her door. "I don't know how to do this, but I'm trying." She kept that one too. The envelope arrived 3 days later. Luca opened it at breakfast, went completely still, then stood so abruptly his chair fell backward. "Get her ready," he told his head of security. "We're moving her, now." Amara, 20 weeks pregnant and still exhausted from bed rest, stared. "What happened?" He handed her the contents. Photos her entering the estate, walking the gardens, sitting in the passenger seat of his car, and a note in typed letters. "Everyone knows about the maid's bastard. Bend to our terms, or we send these to the FBI and CNN. You have 48 hours. The Romanos who rivals," Luca said, already making calls. "They've been trying to dismantle my territory for years. Now they finally have leverage." Amara's hand went to her stomach. "What do they want?" "Me broken. That's all they've ever wanted." By evening, they were at a stone compound 2 hours further north, Luca's childhood home, all fortress walls and iron gates. Security tripled. Every entrance monitored. An older woman waited in the grand hallway, silver hair pulled tight, designer dress immaculate, eyes like Luca's but sharper. "Mama," Luca said. "This is Amara." Signora Moretti looked her up and down with withering precision. "So you're the girl carrying my grandson?" "Yes, ma'am," You're not what I expected. I didn't expect any of this either, Amara said quietly. Something flickered in the older woman's expression, not warmth, but acknowledgement. Come, you'll stay in the East Wing. Over the next week, Signora Moretti watched Amara with the intensity of a scientist studying a specimen. But when Amara didn't cower, didn't beg, didn't play damsel when she attended her online classes, despite the chaos and asked pointed questions about prenatal security protocols, the ice began to crack. You're stronger than the others, Signora finally said over tea. The surrogates. They treated my son like a checkbook. You treat him like a man. He is a man, Amara said. A complicated one. All Moretti men are. Luca left on the 8th day. No warning. Just gone, with 6 of his men, into whatever underworld he'd built his empire on. Amara didn't hear from him for 4 days. When he returned, it was 3 a.m. She heard the commotion car doors, low voices. She went downstairs in her bathrobe and found him in the hallway, blood on his torn shirt, a cut above his eye, exhaustion carved into every line of his face. It's over, he said hoarsely. The Romanos won't threaten you again. She didn't ask what he'd done, didn't want to know. She just ran to him. He caught her carefully, mindful of her belly, and held on like she was the only solid thing in his world. I don't just want the heir anymore, he whispered into her hair. I want you. Stay not because the contract says so, but because you choose to. Amara pulled back, looked into his scarred, exhausted, devastating face. Ask me properly. 2 weeks later, after the threats dissolved and the baby kicked strong and sure, Luca knelt in the estate garden with a ring in his hand. Marry me, he said. Not for the families, not for the baby. For us. Amara smiled. On my terms. Always. I keep my name, James Moretti. I finish my degree. And if anything happens to you, I have full custody. Legally binding. Done. She pulled him to his feet and kissed him, this impossible man who'd crashed into her life like a storm and somehow become her home. Yes. Labor started at 4 a.m. on a Tuesday in late August. Amara woke to a contraction that felt like her body was splitting open. She gripped Luca's arm, and he was instantly awake, calling for the car, the doctor, his mother. The drive to the private hospital was a blur of pain and breathing exercises, and Luca's hand crushing hers. You're doing this, he kept saying. You're so strong. Shut up and let me concentrate, she gasped. He shut up. 17 hours later, in a pristine delivery room with 2 doctors and 3 nurses, and enough security outside to invade a small country, Amara pushed her son into the world. His first cry was piercing, furious, alive. He's healthy, the doctor announced, placing the tiny, wriggling baby on Amara's chest. Perfect. Amara sobbed. Relief, exhaustion, joy, terror, everything at once. Luca stood frozen beside her, staring at the baby like he'd witnessed something holy. Do you want to hold him? The nurse asked gently. He nodded, speechless, and held out his arms. When they placed his son in his hands, this small, impossibly fragile thing with dark hair and wrinkled skin and tiny fists waving at nothing, Luca Moretti, who'd built an empire on violence and control, who'd never cried in front of another human being, broke. Tears streamed down his scarred face. His shoulders shook. Hi, he whispered to the baby. Hi, I'm your dad. I'm your dad. Amara watched through her own tears as the Infertile Mafia boss who was never supposed to have children held his miracle son and wept. They named him Matteo James Moretti, gift of God. 1 year later, Amara sat at the kitchen table of their private home, not the fortress, not the estate, but a place they'd chosen together, highlighter in hand, CPA study guide open, cold coffee beside her. Across from her, Luca held Matteo in his lap, feeding him mashed bananas from a tiny spoon. The baby giggled, slapping pudgy hands on the tray, sending banana flying. You're making a mess, Amara said, smiling. He's an artist, Luca countered, wiping banana off his shirt, expressing himself. Matteo shrieked with delight. Amara reached under the table, pulled out a small box from the drawer, and opened it. Inside, the first pregnancy test, the one with 2 impossible pink lines. She'd kept it, not as evidence of violation, not as proof of trauma, but as the beginning of something she never could have predicted. Through the window, autumn leaves fell in lazy spirals, golden light filtered through. Inside, the 3 of them existed in a pocket of peace carved from chaos and crime and impossible biology. The story that began with 3 pink lines in a cramped Newark bathroom ended here, with a family no one, least of all them, had ever expected. Amara looked at Luca, at Mateo, at the life they'd built from wreckage. How did a virgin black girl become pregnant for an infertile mafia millionaire boss? She murmured. Luca met her eyes, his son in his arms, love written in every scar and shadow on his face. By accident, he said softly. By crime, by fate. Amara smiled, and somehow against all logic. By love.